So in Russian, there is a fantastic expression, and that is "Мужчина должен быть чуть лучше, чем обезьяна." And that's the theme of today's Tip Thursday with me, Connor Klein. Welcome to the Zara Experience, and I'm going to be going into whether you need to be a pretty boy to date beautiful girls in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, and here in Chisinau, the capital of Moldova. Поехали! Salud, привет from Chisinau, the capital of Moldova. So one thing that I've heard quite often from friends who come to visit me in Eastern Europe, not so much from clients, interestingly, when people become my clients, they seem to have already watched a lot of my content and have a fair idea of the dating scene and the travel scene here in Eastern Europe. But a lot of my friends, they just come because they're old friends, it's the first time, and maybe they're not watching as much of the videos here on YouTube. And what they've asked me quite frequently, or made an observation, is there are a lot of guys punching above their weight. Now, what do they mean by that? They look at the local guys, for example, here in Chisinau, and they see the beautiful girls that they're with, and whatever image that they project to them, it doesn't conform what they expect to have to look like to date a beautiful girl. And that begs the question, are good looks useful for a foreign guy when it comes to Eastern Europe, or are they just completely insignificant whatsoever? So another expression you're going to hear a lot, especially when Russian speakers tend to speak in English, is the idea of a real man. Now, what do they mean by that? They don't mean someone who's maybe a metrosexual covered in creams, looking after the skin, getting a manicure and a pedicure. They mean a guy that has like manly pursuits and interests. He's the main breadwinner. He's pretty macho by Western standards. He does very masculine associated recreational activities like maybe hunting, fishing. He knows how to fix stuff, like he's going to be a good DIY guy. So those gender roles, those more stereotypic gender roles, are a lot stronger here in Eastern Europe than they are, say, in Western Europe or in North America. So being a manly man, if you want to call it that, and manning up, that is something that is seen as quite attractive to Eastern European women. A lot more so than in Western Europe, where definitely, in my opinion, being a pretty boy or being good looking physically definitely will go further than it does here. Now, at the same time, you do need to be presentable. Basic grooming is still very important and definitely will make a good impression. Being sloppy is frowned upon here. So paradoxically, whilst natural good looks might not be seen as something very important in terms of what Russian or Ukrainian or Belarusian girls go for. So definitely very important. I'm going to go in descending order of importance from what I can see with my clients and from my friends, and my own personal experience here is being assertive and having presence. Definitely number one. That is what is going to make the biggest impact here when you come to Eastern Europe in terms of your chances with beautiful women. Number two is definitely being interesting. I'm going to be very candid. Like, most guys are super predictable, and the more you hang around beautiful women and look, get a inside look at, say, their text messages and how guys try to pick them up, you realize just how predictable guys are. Most guys just think exactly the same. So be interesting, be different, be able to project a certain amount of status for sure. And then after that, definitely money, wealth, resources will be the next important thing, I think, for dating here. And then the final one, coming in the last place, is how good looking you are. So if I were to divide up my friends and my clients who I've traveled with here in Eastern Europe and put them into two categories, good looking and not so good looking. They were all at least better looking than a monkey. And assess how they got on with local women, who had the more success, who didn't. What I noticed was quite interesting. I would say statistically, it's very hard to see a really noticeable difference in terms of how they got on. I would say it was like maybe 10% difference at most. And even more interesting than that, the fact that looks are a very small percentage in terms of how they got on, in terms of the quality of the women and the quantity of the women, is the fact that the guys who were on average better looking came with higher expectations and definitely left not as happy as the guys who were not as good looking. They probably didn't have, I'm guessing, the same expectations when they came here. But I noticed that from a lot of guys who were better looking, that they were more likely to judge local guys here and say, oh, they're not good looking, or find a way to maybe put them down a little bit rather than focusing on themselves and making themselves as attractive. A certain amount of entitlement. So if you happen to be a super pretty boy, maybe it's actually not going to be that interesting for you to come here, especially if you rely on that a lot. I think that's one of the key things. Like if you're very good looking guy and you actually have some game, you're a presence, you're interesting, you have a lot of confidence, you're then on top of have a lot of financial resources, then you're going to have a fantastic time here, and we're going to go out and party together, and you're really going to have a blast for sure. But if you are just relying on your good looks and that's not actually really that interesting, and you don't have that much presence, and you're kind of just waiting around for girls to approach you, you're going to find it very frustrating in my experience here in Eastern Europe. But on the other hand, on the flip side, if you're a guy who is not considered particularly handsome in, say, North America, Western Europe, and but you have, a pair of cojones, and you have good presence, you're confident, whether you have a lot of money or not. Of course, having more money in general is an advantage over not having it. And you come here, we are going to have a very interesting time, and you're definitely going to see a jump in the quality of women that you can get here for sure. So see you in the very next video. It's going to be here from Moldova. I'm going to be shooting a lot of great content over next week, and I am super excited about that. La revedere in Romanian, and do svidania. I was going to say do pobacenia, but we're not in Ukraine, we're in Moldova. See you in the next video.
Ставьте лайки, подписывайтесь на канал и приезжайте в Одессу.
Tsar Experience.